Hi, everybody. It's me, Dr. Amanda Kemp, and we are on day 3 of our Stop the Hurt, Stop Implicit Racial Bias Challenge. So let me make sure I got all of the technology set up here. I think I have it all. So yeah, here we are in the middle of this challenge, and I want you to know that even if you haven't already signed up, you can still sign up. All you have to do is go to this link that we'll send you, and you can, you'll get an email from us that will have all the stuff that you need to participate. So I'm just going to put it in the comments here, so it's there for you. Awesome. And if you're already in the challenge and you want to forward that to a friend, awesome. Really good. All right. So today's step was about adding stuff. And I've been reading the comments that people have been making on our Facebook page, and I really appreciate how people have been auditing their environments and their, the stuff that we have, and looking for opportunities to add in images and audio messages that will reinforce positive associations about people of color, especially African Americans. And I'm saying that because someone in the group mentioned a TEDx talk by Renee Myers, and I just want to say thank you. I can't remember who that is right now who suggested it, but I looked at it again. I had seen it a while ago. And one of the things that Renee Myers did was while she spoke, she just had a running stream of images of Black men of various ages and colors and professions, because she wanted to really speak to the vulnerability of that demographic in our unconscious. So, oh, these glasses are so dirty. Hello, now you can see my face. So yeah, I wanted to have you think about where can you have your own positive stream of images of groups that are vulnerable to negative stereotypes, or stereotypes that really, or singular stories, that limit their humanity. Oh, that's much better. So I've noticed that, for example, I think Brenda mentioned having a white angel on her wall, and thinking about taking that down and finding an angel of color. And here's what I say about stuff like that. If something really speaks to you, then maybe that's not the thing you take down. Maybe you just add to that. I had a conversation with someone, so I mentor people one-on-one in addition to doing group work like we're doing. And I had a conversation with someone today, and it was so beautiful because she talked about this young part of herself that was really afraid of being forced to do something about her home environment that the younger part of herself wouldn't want to do. And, I want us to think about inclusiveness as not ramming something down our throats, or ramming something down the throat of someone else that we work with or that we live with. Instead, I want us to think about inclusiveness as allowing multiple voices to come to the table. I want to think about inclusiveness as honoring all parts of ourselves. Even the part of ourself that is, hey Jen, even the part of ourself that is angry, or is somehow feeling left out or hurt. That part of ourselves is really important to honor. Not in a sense of you allow the anger or the hurt to drive you, be your only driver, but that you pay attention to it. So if you have something that from your childhood, like a favorite book by Dr. Seuss, for example, or maybe you like the Narnia Chronicles, or something else that's like, that really normalizes whiteness, or that implicitly creates negative associations with people of color, I actually want you to listen to all of yourself. and all of your reactions about that piece of art, and see what inside yourself, what requests do you have that you can say yes to for yourself. So, for example, today, you'll know, when I was talking to this person, what we got down to is that what she really wanted was a place that was good and safe, a place where she felt good and safe, and like her home environment to reinforce that. So if you feel anxious about something, instead of just saying, holding your breath and just ramming it through, I want you to breathe even more and be with your responses and get curious about them in a loving way, in a compassionate way, so that some part of yourself doesn't go underground and start to influence your actions and other feelings about future events and leave you completely surprised. Hey, Jerry, glad you could make this one. Glad you found it. So I want you to just take a moment and think about where you have resistance. Lately, my husband and I have been talking about an incident where, while I was canvassing, somebody called the police, and the police came to our house, followed us, and you know, a white woman kind of followed us on the street, you know, to intimidate us from in her neighborhood. And I've just been thinking about, you know, so many people have said like shame, you know, or have said other things a little rougher about her. And I actually have been thinking about, what do I really want? You know, what's the real change that we want? And I think what we want is for all of us to feel safe and to have our voices matter and to be included. And that woman's fear and anger and, you know, and comments that we didn't belong and we better get out of here, you know, like that kind of thing. That's a human response. That's not just her. We all have some of that in us. And, you know, she's not in this challenge. She hasn't asked me to, you know, be her racial justice mentor. So I don't have her interest or her permission, but I do have yours and I have mine. And I do want to say that the way to work through resistance is to treat it with consideration. Treat your resistance with some kindness. What I do know, and you know, I'm not, I read a lot of other people's stuff, so I don't think I have any original thoughts. Honestly, I think I just pick from here and there and share and observe my own life and then share that with you. What I do know from reading like Brene Brown, for example, is that when we aren't with ourselves, when we shame and condemn others, there's actually like a boomerang effect. There's a boomerang effect when you shame and condemn somebody else. And what that effect is that ultimately you're telling yourself that you're not willing to accept or be compassionate to yourself when you feel those feelings, or when you get called out for being, you know, for having an ism, for your implicit bias regarding race or class, or your implicit bias regarding color or religion shows up, and we've been inculcated with these biases, so they are going to show up. So the way to transform them isn't through condemnation. And so by recognizing what's over there in the other person that is also in you, you have the best opportunity or possibility of transforming that bias. So I'm speaking about this because of a very beautiful conversation I had with someone this morning, a European American woman who was willing to be patient with her resistance to shifting her environment to make it more multicultural and multiracial. Who was willing to be curious about it and to move through it slowly rather than to try to jam it through to be right. And I want you to know that I appreciate that sense of urgency and that sense of fire for justice that we have. And I also want us to be super honest with ourselves. So I'm going to take a moment there and see if there are any questions that people have, and also look at my notes from looking at your Facebook comments today. So, something else that came up was when you have favorite books, from your childhood. One of the things I suggest is that you actually reread those books. Don't throw them away. Um, I'm a writer. I don't think I could really tell you to throw away your books. I don't keep every book that I've ever read. I do pass them on. But if you have favorite classics, I actually recommend that you reread them with a racial justice lens, because that will help you to see how implicit racial bias has been working in you. And hey, Linda, glad you could be here. So if you reread the stuff from your childhood and not just reread it, but comment on it, I'm a big proponent of writing and sharing your thoughts with other people. So not everybody wants to have a blog. Not everybody wants to post something deeply felt or personal on a social media. So if that works for you, that's a place for you to do it. If that doesn't work for you, then don't do it there. But write it somewhere and share it. Because your reflections, your critique of that literature from your childhood is an important part of your growth, and it's an important part of you sharing with people who you care about what's happening for you. So often, like in the situation with me recently with the canvassing while Black, so often the presumption is that racism is a conscious, malicious thought or attitude of hostility where, the N-word is used or some other kind of racial slur is used. And obviously what this challenge is about having us look for the implicit, the indirectly stated or the indirectly reinforced stories and images that justify or that keep white right or white better than people of color, or that are anti-Black in their content. So when you choose to write about Narnia, or you choose to write about Dr. Seuss with a racial justice lens, you're helping to spread the understanding that racism isn't limited to a conscious, malicious racial slur or intention. It's the reproduction, unconsciously or unintentionally, of inequality. Can I say that again? Racism, in addition to malicious and intentional harm and damage, it's also the unintentional, unconscious reinforcement of white superiority over people of color, or of in this case, Blackness. The reproduction of stories and images and sounds that make Blackness dangerous, undesirable, and something you call the police about, and that make whiteness something, innocent, desirable, normal, superior. So I wanted to reinforce that because I got a call from our local newspaper, and the reporter was basically said to me something along the lines of, well, can you prove that this, white woman had malicious racial intent, since she didn't use any specifically racial language towards you? And I said, well, what we know is that implicit bias is widespread. Implicit racial bias happens automatically without necessarily having a conscious desire or thought. And the quickness with which somebody calls the police or presumes that you are a threat or that you don't belong is part of implicit racial bias. It's part of how that functions inside us. So what can I say? That's kind of a sophisticated thought, perhaps, for, local media who've never had any real experience or study of racism as a system, and of, whiteness as a system, as a discourse. Okay, so I don't want to, I'm not trying to diss anybody, but I'm just saying that that limited view of racism is what keeps us in trouble. So let's see. What else came through? I wanted to also speak to this idea about something being forced down your throat or swallowing your voice because of a fear of saying the wrong thing or of being attacked. And the fear of saying the wrong thing is, I think, ultimately about a fear of being attacked or abandoned or somehow harmed. And it's a basic human fear. So here's what I would urge you to do as you are investigating your own implicit racial bias and talking about that with other people. I would encourage you, as a first step, to talk about yourself. And that's why I mentioned writing about your experience. One of the things that I feel very comfortable with in my post, for example, when I wrote Canvassing While Black, is that I was writing about my experience. I never attributed or claimed to know exactly what the thought process was of the person who was, harassing us. But I knew what my experience was, and I owned it. And I think that when you can speak from your experience, and if you are a person who is European American or white, if you speak from your own experience of having identified implicit bias, implicit racial bias in your childhood favorite stories, or on the walls of your home, or in your encounters at a supermarket, or at a staff meeting, when you speak from yourself, from your experience, no one can own your experience the way that you can. You have the authority. You hear the word author in there? You have the authority to speak from your experience, to hold the ground that you stand on. So if you practice being with your breath, practice getting out your thoughts, then that whole phenomenon of swallowing, of getting clogged up so that you can't speak, of feeling like something's being shoved down your throat, you will have some other bodily memory of what power feels like. So we're going to get more into that as we go through. Awesome. So it was great being with you guys. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much for participating in this 5-day Stop the Hurt, Stop Implicit Racial Bias Challenge. And I will see you all tomorrow. Peace and love. Bye-bye. Okay.